We can now move on to our third topic, which is police brutality. The first question is, what do you think is the most significant issue our criminal justice system is facing and why? Republicans, you have the floor.
So on the topic of police brutality, the biggest problem in America with that is the fact that it's not police brutality at all. It's actually brutality against police. Anti-police rhetoric has been spread by our mainstream media and by President Obama's agenda. And we've seen this evident in the Dallas police shootings, the chants that we were talking about from the Black Lives Matter protest. In 2015, there were 991 deaths by police-involved shootings. In that same year, there were 51,000 incidents in which a police officer was assaulted. That pretty much says it right there. So,
Greens, you can have the floor.
Thank you. I'm about to say something here that will probably make everybody's statistics up here seem a little bit odd. There are nearly 18,000 police departments in the U.S. right now, which are so hard to keep track of that FBI Director James Comey said we cannot have an informed discussion because we don't have data. I cannot tell you how many people were shot by police in the United States last month, last year, or anything about the demographics. Now, this should tell you something about all of our statistics is that they are inherently biased because they are not government statistics, they're local statistics, which are taken and in many cases used to show police departments in their localities in a positive light.
Okay. Young Americans for Liberty.
So if we're going to talk about the biggest issue as far as criminal justice reform, we need to talk about the drug war. Absolutely, all of the issues about criminal justice that we're going to talk about here today are tied to the drug war in some way. First of all, spending. Obviously, we spend a ton of money, $1.3 trillion since we started in 1970. Second of all, mass incarceration. We have 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prisoners. We have more prisoners than China. Not per capita, more prisoners total. That is because of the drug war. And half of those people are in there for nonviolent drug offenses. So if we're going to talk about the most important thing that we can do right now to change this thing, it's going to be ending the drug war. And especially when we're talking about the interaction between the community and the police, the drug war has done more than any other policy in creating that divide.
Democrats?
So to piggyback off of my libertarian friend, I also agree that the issue of criminal justice reform that is one of the most important is our prison system. Right now, it costs $31,286 a year to keep an inmate in prison at the federal level when we're talking about a national average. In Virginia, we've gotten that down to $25,129 per year, and we've done that only through extensive reentry programming and a rehabilitative focus to our DOC processes. We need to replicate what we've been able to achieve in Virginia, leading to the second lowest rate of recidivism in the country nationwide. And we can do this by implementing alternative sentencing options, especially in the cases of drug crimes. But overall, our criminal justice system needs overhaul. We need to be looking at how we can rehabilitate, not punish. There's something wrong with the system where people are paying their debt to society and then immediately going back into the system because there's no way for them to rehabilitate into normal life and become productive citizens once again.
Republicans?
okay, so going back to the statement that the Green Party made about FBI Director Comey, the statistics that I just read off actually come from the FBI website, fbi.gov. I don't know if Director Comey doesn't know that. We saw he handled the email case. So, also another issue, if we want to talk about the prison reform, there's no doubt, I definitely agree. We definitely have to, our sentencing needs to be reformed for drug offenses, nonviolent drug offenses. The biggest issue is we also need reform in some of our violent crime sentencing. 80% of our violent crimes are committed by repeat offenders. So,
Young Americans for Liberty?
Hi, yeah, I'd like to just give one little thing for you guys to think about. When you give one group a monopoly on violence, you're endangering innocent citizens, particularly minorities who we have seen have been taking the fall for a lot of these police brutality attacks. There's an innate divide between government and citizenry when police are the only ones who are able to legally take you away and imprison you for a nonviolent offense. There's something that we need to change in our society, and I think it definitely starts with prison reform.
Greens?
As kind of a rebuttal to the Republicans, no offense. what Director James Comey was saying was that they are receiving statistics, and they may even post those statistics, but they don't trust the statistics that they're getting. They sense an inherent bias because of who they're receiving the statistics from, and they just don't trust them. And to carry on into the conversation that everyone else is having, yes, there is a high degree of recidivism in our country, which means that people continue to go back to prison after being released, and this usually starts with a nonviolent offense. And so we really need to take a good look at the offenses that people are being imprisoned for, and see if we can't decriminalize some of those and have them as a fine or something, an alternative to being placed in jail.
Young Democrats.
Just to piggyback on the Greens and to respond to what you said about violent offenders being repeat offenders, this again ties back to the recidivism issue. If we can put in place a rehabilitative focus to our prison system, we won't deal with this issue. We need to make sure that when people are going to prison for their first, possibly non-violent offense, they're going to be learning life skills. They're going to be reforming and becoming, once again, productive members of society. That needs to be the focus, not a punitive system.
That's what I meant by the rehabilitation.
Glad we're on the same page.
And to piggyback off of that, we need to decrease police militarization as well. The 1033 program provides direct funding for every state from the Pentagon to buy military equipment. So far right now, Culpeper and Tazewell County possess mine-resistant vehicles. They have giant tanks for a citizen for the population less than 50,000. New Kent and Rockingham is a population less than Virginia Tech, have grenade launchers. They have tanks, and they have 154 guns, and it's mainly 5.56 millimeter rifles. There's no reason the police needs tanks or grenade launchers for when they're supposed to be protecting citizens.
Republicans, then Libertarians, and then we need to move on to the next question.
Those grenade launchers are mainly used for tear gas grenades because you can shoot both non-lethal and lethal grenades. No police, it takes over a certain level of clearance in order to actually throw a grenade or use a grenade. I mean, I've never seen the FBI use an actual grenade in a raid or anything like that. Normally those are reserved to launch smoke grenades more accurately or tear gas grenades. And also for police demilitarization, come SWAT events, we do need them in the safest gear possible. Should the police get a tank? Probably not. But should they get a SWAT vehicle or a repurposed Humvee? Yes, because that does help.
If we're going to talk about...
No, you go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so if we're going to talk about police militarization, it's not necessarily a problem with how they use the equipment. It's really with the training and the kind of mindset that it gives the police. If the police go into a situation, which they do almost all the time now, feeling like they're in a military situation, it's going to end badly for a lot of people, and we've seen that recently. Basically, the military actually has more strict guidelines for engagement than police do in this country. They are told to not shoot unless they are shot at, but police will be told to shoot if they feel endangered.
And I just want to add something, a quick observation. I've noticed that from the other three groups, the Greens and Democrats on climate change and free speech, they trusted the government a lot, and the Republicans did not. In this issue, the Republicans trust the government a lot, and they don't. Can you guys be a bit consistent and not contradictory?
How about we all just do not trust the government? There we go.
Yeah, we don't trust the government in any of these issues. Thank you.
Our next question is, according to a report released by the Sentencing Project, African Americans are more than 5 times as likely to be incarcerated compared to whites in the United States. Can you outline the causes of this disparity and how it should be addressed? Young Democrats?
The causes of this disparity are an underlying racist structure in our criminal justice system that needs to be addressed. But the biggest problem about this is not just the immediate inequality of locking up more black people than white people. It's the fact that we're taking an entire generation of particularly young black men away from their families and disrupting an entire racial group. This again ties back to what I said about rehabilitative processes and alternative sentencing options. A lot of this has to do with racially unequal sentencing for drug crimes that has been historic in the United States. And if we can come up with more rehabilitative responses to our drug crimes, like many of these clubs have also agreed is a good idea, we can possibly start to fix some of this racial injustice. But again, I want to stress that this comes from a historically racist underlying institution in our criminal justice system that must be addressed.
College Republicans and then Young Americans for Liberty.
Okay, so the biggest disparity towards racial minority groups doesn't have to do at all with how they're incarcerated. The biggest disparities are the fact that their communities are failing. They have failing schools. There's a lack of employment, abject poverty. You put these situations all together, and you couple that with the fact that for the last quarter century, you've had Democratic city officials in the inner cities of metropolis America restricting police from going into these cities or into these inner city communities and patrolling as they should. This has just manifested into a huge drug and gang violence situation that really is on the cusp of out of control for the law enforcement officials. And I mean, you have thousands and thousands of deaths of young black men aged 18 to 24 every year in the streets of Chicago, Detroit, Baltimore, and Milwaukee.
Yeah, so just to kind of piggyback off of what the Dems are saying, absolutely agree. If we're going to talk about the historical racist background of incarceration, how it's going in the United States, and tying it back to the drug war, which I think that, again, intersects with a lot of what we're talking about here. If we're going to talk about the drug war and racism, in the past year, a Nixon aide, a recording of a Nixon aide came out with him basically saying that the drug war was basically thought up in order to criminalize being black, being a hippie, because they can't actually criminalize those things outright. They criminalize something that's associated with those groups and then carried it on from there in order to incarcerate those people at a higher rate. Studies show that whites and blacks use drugs at roughly the same rate, yet black people are incarcerated at 10 times the rate. This is something that's historically rooted, like the Dems said, and it definitely needs reform right now.
Greens and then Democrats, and then we'll be moving on.
Thank you. I would like to bring up the 80s. And I appreciate I'm not of any minority, so I understand the irony of someone like me talking about these problems. But during the 80s, there was a lot of selective policing, especially during the quote-unquote drug war that may or may not have been propagated by the government. But there was also a lot of selective policing in neighborhoods where they knew a lot of minorities would be living, and this caused kind of a tradition that is more or less carried over because those same precincts are set up the same way. And it does disproportionately affect African Americans as well as other minorities, but specifically African Americans. And those things need to be revised and looked over, and we need to change the way that we handle those situations.
I want to piggyback off what the Libertarians said and also address the Republicans, the college Republicans as well. White youth 12 to 17 are 3 times more likely to have committed some type of drug charge, whether it's dealing, sharing, or using drugs. And yet it's black men that are being locked up in prisons. People don't go to suburbs and college towns looking for white dealers. They go to cities. They go to urban areas. There's an association of black people with crime that links back to the 1800s, the late 1800s, where convict labor was used and black people were put back into slavery by using petty laws that were associated with black crime and black people to put them in the system. The same thing is still going on today when you look at the disparity between drugs that are typically associated with black poor communities and the fines and time associated with that, and the drugs associated with more white and upper class communities like coke versus cocaine. Can I finish? Our system has been full of racism and was founded on racism and oppression, and it's our job to address it and fix the situation.
Thank you.